Welcome to today's event, Making Art and Making Change, a conversation with Roxbury artists. We thank you all for your patience as we dealt with technical difficulties, and we're glad you're here. I'm Bithya Israel, UU Urban Ministry Social Justice Fellow for the Arts and Humanities, moderating today. In a moment, I will introduce our panelists, but first, we'd like to let you know that we'd love to hear your questions. After we have a conversation on today's topic at 4 p.m., we'll address your questions. So please, to submit your questions, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen instead of the chat. All right, thank you, and I'd like to introduce our panelists. Candelaria Silva-Collins connects arts and culture to community and community to arts and culture. She is program manager for the Fellows Athenaeum Trust Fund of the Boston Public Library and a consultant on the leadership team for the Creative Entrepreneur Fellowship of the Arts and Business Council of Greater Boston. Candelaria was director of the award-winning Cultural Economic Development Program Arts, Culture, and Trade Roxbury, or ACT Roxbury, through Madison Park Development Corporation. As the first director of ACT Roxbury from 1998 until 2007, she conceived, planned, and raised funds for its signature programs including Roxbury Film Festival, Roxbury Open Studios, Roxbury Literary Annual, Roxbury in Motion, which is a playwright mentorship, and others. Candelaria's essays, children's stories, short stories, and reviews have been published in local and national publications, and she is an active blogger. Her first children's book, Stacy Became a Frog One Day, was published in October 2020. She is currently chair, designators of the George B. Henderson Foundation and serves on the advisory board for Right on the Dot. Previously, she served on the boards of Goddard College, Wheelock Family Theater, Boston Foundation for Architecture, Dunamis Boston, and Discover Roxbury. Chanel Thervil holds a Master's of Arts in Teaching Art Education from Massachusetts College of Art and Design and a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Painting from Pace University's Dyson College of Arts and Sciences. Chanel's prolific list of exhibitions includes shows at the Boston Children's Museum, the De Cordova Sculpture Park in Lincoln, Mass., the Ethelbert Cooper Gallery of African and African American Art, Cambridge, Mass., the Repertory Theater, and many others in Roxbury and Dorchester, including Elevated Thought, Dudley Cafe, and Grove Hall. Most recently in 2021, her exhibitions have included Access Art at the Boston Center for the Arts and at the Gallery 1832 in Cambridge, Mass., with an exhibit called The Black Family Representation, Identity, and Diversity. Chanel's work has been featured by WCVB's Cityline, the Boston Globe, Harvard Gazette, the Boston Herald, just to name a few. Napoleon Jones-Henderson is Executive Director of the Research Institute of African and African Diaspora Arts, Inc., in Roxbury, Massachusetts. He has received awards both for his artwork and in recognition of his community inreach and curatorial efforts championing Black art internationally. He was honored by the National Conference of Artists with the Award of Excellence and the Massachusetts State Senate Amical Citation for Cultural Excellence. Among others, Joan Henderson has received the Boston Foundation's Brother Thomas Fellowship, the Merit of Honor Award from the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, and award for outstanding recognition from the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Over the course of his career, he has served in various academic positions at Malcolm X College in Chicago, Emerson College in Boston, and Vermont College of Norwich University, and others. His artwork is in the collections of the DuSable Museum of African American History, Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, Hampton University Museum, the Museum of National Center of Afro-American Artists, and others. In addition, his artwork is in distinguished private collections and numerous public art commissions. And now, please join me in welcoming our panelists. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hello.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Yes, so this is a very timely discussion, as I'm sure we'd agree. A very pivotal time in history right now with an international outcry for equality and the pandemic, which is still in progress and which makes getting together such a meaningful time for all of us. So first, I'd like to open with our first question to you. How has art changed the world up to now? What pivotal artists and moments in history have inspired your artistic practice? Who would like to begin?
Well, any of my sisters here, you all can open this for us.
Oh, yeah, I think for me, I feel like art up until this point has been just a full expression of humanity and a way for people to share their inner thoughts, like bring the internal to the external. And I think especially for me with my artwork, like that's what I'm very proud of, like ensuring that what I'm creating is a reflection of the beauty that I feel lies within me and other people. So I'd like to think that art is continuing on that trail as the world turns. And especially now with what you've said around the time that we're in and the uprisings that are happening and the ways that we're trying to think about politics differently, art is really that unifier and ways for us to share our ideas, and also ways for people to feel empowered. Like art is being used as a tool for mobilizing and organizing as well. So yeah.
Speaking of organizing, thank you, Chanel. Speaking of organizing, Candelaria, you've done a lot of that right here locally and beyond. What do you have to say about that, the organizing element and the change that you've seen that it's brought about until now?
A couple of things. One is I grew up in the Blackness, as one of my recent blog posts said, and I grew up in a very traditional Southern Baptist church in St. Louis. And there was a hymn that I really responded to from the time I was about 3 years old, which said, "May the work I've done speak for me." And so that colors my whole approach to the world. I've always been about creation, not destruction. I am not a native of Roxbury, not a native of Boston, but when I came here to go to college at Northeastern, I was struck by the history and the beauty and all the talented people. And so I've done in different roles, but specifically through ACT Roxbury, I tried to show our motto was that Roxbury was rich, and that art and creativity are a way to reflect that richness. So one of the things that I did to organize very originally is we had a big meeting at Roxbury Community College with anybody who wanted to come. We had, did ads in the banner. This was before social media existed. And we had focus groups to ask people, what are the arts and creative and cultural events that you'd like to see? And then we had the same thing with artists. And we asked them, what are the supports you need as artists? What do you want? And one of the things that came out of that was consistent cultural programming, resource sharing and development. So everything that we did and everything that I did as the director of ACT Roxbury was to reflect the needs of the desires and hopes of the community and the needs of artists. And so everything in the Roxbury Film Festival, I developed the Roxbury Literary Annual. I have photos of, we had a youth edition, we had an adult edition where people got to see themselves in print. We had Roxbury Open Studios for visual artists. We had things for playwrights. So what I think is that, and this is some across the city and across the country, letting artists reflect who we are and also expand and pull us further than we are. Yes. And I'll shut up right there.
Wonderful. Napoleon, your background in Chicago, and Candelaria mentioned resource sharing through AfriCobra and such a strong organization. What have you found, what movements and changes were you able to exact through that group?
Well, I would say that, in direct response to the question is, how do you want your art to shape this moment in time? I would say that my visual image making has, from 1968 to today, which is the history of AfriCobra, which is the African Commune of Bad Relevant Artists, that 9 other artists and myself shaped into its being in Chicago, and we continue today. This is our 52nd year as a functioning active artist collective, and we've established a set of principles and aesthetic criteria that underpin our work. And that was, to put it in a small nugget, I would say, was that it was about reaffirming the aesthetics and the philosophical and spiritual aspects and assets of African diaspora people. And so with that being the fundamental groundwork from which all of our work comes into being, what we were doing in '68 is exactly what we need to be doing today in 2021, because the issues are no different in terms of so many of the social and economic and political issues, but very clearly the aesthetic platform and landscape fully informs much of what is taking place. Because if we just take a cursory look at the individuals who are marching about the various events and such throughout the world, that many times are sparked by events that happen to us in this country, it is just completely a panoscope of artistic expression in everybody's signs and posters and the way they dress, the way they conduct themselves. All of that is such. So the aesthetics of the visual, as well as all of the other art forms, and that is the art form of being affirmative and being activist, is essential to life. And so the creative energy simply, I think, made manifest in all the things that we do as people, one individually and collectively.
Thank you. Chanel, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been involved in public art here locally and probably beyond. Is that correct?
Yeah, and one of the first pieces of public art I got a chance to get my hands mixed up in was through Napoleon, being connected with him and the Center for Art and Community Partnerships at Mass Art.
And then also, what other public art projects have you been involved in? I don't want to misquote the wrong project, so.
Yeah, so I've done a couple of things with the city of Boston. So last year, I was one of the artists who was doing the Public Space Invitational, which was essentially this program that worked with the Department of Urban Mechanics for the city of Boston and local community gardens spread all across. So I was actually paired with El Jardín de la Amistad here in my neighborhood in Roxbury. Haha. And through that project, I essentially interviewed all of the folks who were gardeners in the community and asked them about how their interactions with nature had been shaping and changing their lives in positive ways. So with the content that I gathered from interviewing them, I used that as a springboard for designs that I created on different pots for planters of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. And then through working with the city and the trustees, we were able to give out those pots of herbs, flowers, and plants for free to people in the neighborhood as a way to encourage them to have some interaction with nature in a way that feels safe and also adds to the richness of their homes. Wonderful. So that's been one that I've been really excited about, like that connection of organizing, listening to a community's needs, and also like letting out that creative expression that we want to see out in the world to create that positive change.
Bithya, may I say something?
Yes.
I was going to also say that not only in terms of racial justice and reckoning, but also in terms of COVID-19, that the moment is teaching us, for those of us who will listen, that we are all interconnected in the world. The moment is teaching us that sometimes people we took for granted, the people who are cashiers, the people who stock food, the people who deliver things to our door, that these people, the healthcare workers obviously, are absolutely essential. But it's also taught us that how would we have existed during the quarantine, the deep quarantine, without the arts? Without creative output, without the ability, a lot of people rediscovered in having this time where you couldn't travel and you didn't know where you should go and what was safe. People have started writing again, singing again, painting again, looking at plays and concerts from all over the country because of this vehicle that we're using today called Zoom. So to me, it's shown that the arts are absolutely critical to our well-being. They're part of what our health should be, and they're ways that connect us, because the thing about creativity and art is that you could give a group of visual artists or a group of writers the same material, the same art supplies. You could give people words and say, okay, write. And each one of us would come up with something that was unique, but also something that connected to others of us. You know, and so that's, I think, the moment where you get to really listen. And so for the first time since I was in my college years, I actually have paid as much attention to my own personal art but I hadn't done that for years. For years, I was always doing other people's art and pushing other artists and pushing that kind of thing. So I think this is an incredible moment. So I know that as we are getting vaccinated and as we're coming out of this moment, there's some things that I vowed not to do. Not to get crazy busy again, not savor downtime and silence, I reached out to a lot of people, I called people, I sent letters to people, that those, making those connections are something that I don't want to stop doing, because we can get so busy that we don't take time to do the connecting and to do the regenerating that we need to do to be more creative and to be assets to the world, and to promote ourselves as creatives, as assets to our community. We're not separate from our communities.
Mm-hmm. That's an extremely important element, because as we have noticed, if we paid some small attention to some of the news and other things, is that even the natural environment has begun to reset itself because of our absence and our aggressive process toward and being in it. I mean, people have become aware of the fact that, yes, there are birds around, believe it or not. People have seen squirrels, people have begun to speak and talk to each other, and people found out that, cooking is an essential art form that we all should get around to doing. And that the humane aspect of what has come out of something that has been, and not so much been, but is traumatic in many ways, is that it has put us back into, we are able, I feel, to hear our hearts beat, understand and feel our blood flowing through our veins, because we've been able, and by force of nature, and this virus is a nature thing, to rejoin ourselves, to come in touch with ourselves. And through that, via the Zoom situation and these other various platforms, we've been able to connect with people globally in a way that we were not connecting before. People, I believe, thought they were really connecting through the so-called social medias. And I question whether it's a social media, but nonetheless, have been connecting with them. But we have, through Zoom, have actually been a lot more social in the context, because we're able to see each other and be accountable to each other in ways that those other platforms don't allow. And I personally have not seen the kind of abuse on this platform that we're using that tends to seem to appear more often on the others. And it, again, I say the creative activities that we all get involved in, which is simply one of getting up, brushing our teeth, and saying hello to the person that's in the house with us. Our children, our parents are now knowing what it's like to raise children because they have them with them all the time. And it's a beautiful thing, So there's, if we look at the creative side of life, which is the arts, every aspect of it, it's a rich experience, and we're going to come out of this a much more humane people.
So yes, so that's a good point. How the arts have helped address trauma, and how the trauma has actually informed art. And someone on the panel, I'm sorry, I forgot who mentioned it. You talked about artists pushing forward. So now, because we hope to exit and just to continue being better than we were before. So how do you see your role as a change agent, as an artist? How do you want to shape this moment in time through your artistry? Who would like to take that?
Well, I will continue to do until my last breath what I have been doing for, I know, the last 52 years, is using the visual images that I create as instruments of reaffirmation of our humanity as a people, and to push for a platform in which we all understand that we are interconnected, belong to one human family, and that the spiritual aspect of life is as important as the economic aspect of life, if not more important. And that I see my work as, always have seen my work as being an instrument that is connected to the audience that I have, which is everyone who lays their eye upon my work, because my work is nothing more than taking the creative spirit and the essence that they give to me, and I reinterpret it in a visual form, and we share it back and forth. It's a symbiotic relationship between my work and the world that I live in.
Sharing. Speaking of sharing, Chanel, you've been doing a lot of sharing in workshops with kids, influencing the next generation. So how would you like to shape tomorrow through your artistry?
Yeah, I think for me, whether I'm wearing the artist hat, the educator hat, or the curator hat, my big motivation is providing an opportunity for people to reflect and think a little more deeply about themselves and others, and why they feel the way they feel about themselves or others. That's been my big push through my work. I would say more in this moment in particular, I've been really focused on creating works of art that are playful and that also prioritize joy and a sense of relief for people. So one thing that I've been doing, right when the pandemic started, I created this series called the Quarantine Self-Care Series. And through that project, I've been interviewing different creatives of color and asking them about how they've been taking care of themselves as a way for us to have more casual conversations around mental health, I know especially in communities of color and Black communities, and specifically, there's still a lot of stigma around, first and foremost, acknowledging that mental health is a thing, and that mental health hygiene and mental health maintenance is also a thing. So through that project and having these candid interviews with different artists of different cultural backgrounds and talking to them about what have you just been doing to keep yourself okay in this moment. It's been really illuminating, not only for me, because I'm like stealing tips so I can try some things on myself to feel okay, but also it's been a way for me to stretch the mediums of my creative practice. So typically when I make portraits, I tend to go the route of using wood. So the portrait behind me is of my grandmother, and that's on wood. And that's the typical style that my portraits have taken up until 2020, when I started this series and actually began working on tablecloth and using construction paper and Crayola crayons. And a big reason why I was looking at tablecloth as the medium to connect all these ideas is because tablecloth is the thing that connects us socially, right? When we go to a birthday party or a wedding or a Thanksgiving dinner, there's always some kind of beautiful tablecloth that kind of aligns with the mood or the tone that we're trying to set. So for me, I chose like 99-cent store tablecloth that is often pops up at barbecues or baby showers outside. And I use that as the material again to reinforce this idea of like being able to celebrate in spite of all the uncertainty.
Thank you. Candelaria, I have a question. You've done a lot of work with, the fellowship programs and a lot of initiatives to get artists together. What do you have to say about how would you say that many artists are kind of in a silo, kind of doing, fighting the good fight on their own? What would be your suggestion for having a more collective approach to maybe really, push the effort forward for greater societal change? Well, you've seen a lot of artists. What do you have to say about that?
Most of the Black artists I work with and other artists of color, but primarily Black, and even some of the white artists and creatives that I work with, very much feel connected to community. They love the opportunity to talk to other artists, however. So the fellowship, the Creative Entrepreneur Fellowship that the Art and Business Council does that I coordinate, people love the fact that they are able to have a monthly session where there are different topics, but they also get to just talk. And this year we initiated something where there's just free talk, where we have evenings where artists we Zoom and people just talk wherever the conversation leads us. I think they feel a lot of personal responsibility. I think they like, as Chanel said, is sharing tips. I think they want to find ways to give back without feeling exploited. And so we're always talking about the fine line. Artists are often asked to share things and to donate things and to give things, and not always compensated fairly or are looked at askew sometimes if they ask for compensation. So we talk about if your foundation is sound, if your business practice is sound, that artists are entrepreneurs, whether they think they are or not, and you take care of your foundation, then you can decide when you can give things, your time, your creativity, actually specific works. And people are always trying to figure out how to elevate and connect with community. And that there are times, though, when you have to say, if I'm finishing a manuscript or if I'm mounting a show, I might have to pull back from community obligations or interests for a moment, because if you don't, you'll never finish anything, right? And then that you come back because your consciousness is that you're giving. And the other thing that I try to, I've said a lot, particularly this year, is that artists are citizens too. Sometimes people act as though if you're an artist or you're a creative person, that somehow you're not a citizen. And in fact, you pay taxes, you vote, you might be in a neighborhood association, you know all the things that are happening around. So people try to put us in a special place that disconnects us. And artists are very much connected to community, particularly artists who have come from more modest means. And I think particularly Black artists and artists of color, we've always felt that sense of connection and duty, that you want to reflect and you want to reflect well, and you want your people to understand what you're doing and to understand and accept your work. We often, particularly those of us who were older, had to fight against our families sometimes to say that we were going to make a living in the arts or in creativity. And a lot of times it was because they wanted to protect us from being destitute or being disappointed. Black parents are very protective of their progeny. We don't want them to be hurt. We don't want them to face the rejection that we know can often exist for them. So I think that's part of it. So there's always this community connection, and you're having to balance between that sense of deep connection. It's not even an obligation. It's because you feel that connection and the need to create. Mm-hmm. So I hope I answered somewhere in all that your question.
Yes, and there's some overlap I'm finding between Candelaria and Chanel. The self-care and how having your foundation strong, now you're able to give to the community. And then also, Napoleon, you said, brushing your teeth, getting up in the morning. People are creative. Perhaps maybe some of us in society might not realize how creative we actually are. And then sometimes pivotal moments like the marathon bombing right here in Boston, it makes us stop, and then imagery, seeing a sneaker, seeing a sign, seeing things that in other contexts of art might seem like a piece of artwork. In some of the pivotal moments, they resonate, they hit home because something personally affected society. So what can artists do to help I'll say, people who maybe consider themselves non-artists recognize the part that they actually play in humanity, in the maybe ways that they actually are being artistic without realizing it? What can artists do to help bring in and activate people that don't consider themselves artists?
Well, I would say that I'll share this bit. The Institute, the Research Institute of African and African Diaspora Arts, which I founded in 1979, which was 4 years after moving here. But from 1982 until 2002, 20 consecutive years, we held an annual Juneteenth celebration here at the Institute, which is my home, the Edward Everett Hill House, of which we had an exhibition by an individual artist, be they local or from other parts of the country. My friend Ibn Pori Pitts, who was instrumental and with myself in starting the celebration of Juneteenth here in Boston, of which Charles Yancey, when he was city councilor in 1982, had a proclamation from the city of Boston indicating that June 19th was Juneteenth week in Boston. But at these events, to your point about the everyday person, so to speak, who may not see themselves as a creative person, at those gatherings, we had not only the visual artists, we had poets, we had dancers, we had musicians. A lot of the artists around here, Salim Washington, who is no longer here, he lives in South Africa. Many of the artists came and played their music, and children, and it was a family day event. People came and they didn't just come to attend, but they came with food. I've got this huge kitchen, and Candy can attest to all the different kinds of things that have occurred at my home here for all of those years, where it was about food, celebration, respect, and honoring each other in the context of the creative gathering of all of us, which the point that Candy made about citizens. Everyone who came, they saw everyone else here as just another person who was a member of the community. 250 people over the course of that Saturday's event that would pass through the house here and come and enjoy the day with each other, learn other kinds of things. There would be little workshops. And as a matter of fact, there was a continuous mural until the buildings were restored and now lived in properly. Just around the corner from me here, 5 brownstones where they were boarded up. And we created a community mural there celebrating Juneteenth. And each year for at least 18 of those years, we refurbished it to meet people who came to the celebrations and the children who live in the community. And trust me, it was never, ever defaced at all. It was a part of the community. Everyone worked on it. People always came back to it. And so that sense of sharing has always been, and it's been a sharing that is about allowing everyone to know that we all are participants in the creative journey. Because we as artists, if someone's a portrait, and I mean, we had people like Paul Goodnight and others sit here doing portraits of people and all of those sorts of things. So everybody was engaged, from the mother with all her little children who were here, and they were running all over the house, and my children who were no longer young and little, but they were here running through it. And so all the children grew up in this whole process here of a community of culture, and everyone was equal and as much creative. Because let me tell you, the creations that all of the sisters and the men, some of them, myself one of them once in a while, created in the kitchen, everybody was enjoyed that productive, creative product.
That is wonderful. And that brings me back to Chanel. You mentioned joy, and it's funny you mentioned that because most of your publicity photos are just like joy on your face. That's like your signature look. So one of your recent projects, what does hope look like to you, that you had an interactive project with the public? Joy being probably one of the perfect antidotes to trauma and gloom. What are you able to do when you have such a pivotal event, Napoleon, Chanel, Candelaria, to elevate it and let it travel now that we have social media? Are you doing anything, Chanel, using after it happens, capturing it, packaging it, and then giving it wings?
Yeah, I think one of the really important things as artists is for us all to really prioritize documenting our work. And that's something that I've had reinforced not only through mentorship from Napoleon, but also through my interactions with Candelaria and the Arts and Business Council. So she mentioned the fellowship, and I was actually one of the fellows in a recent cohort. And through not only those interactions with people who've been on the ground and just doing it longer than me, there's also a sense, especially now with technology evolving and social media, of really sharing all of the great things that you're capturing, and also finding ways to pass information along. Because the reality is art is interpreted differently by every person. And especially when you're doing public art or artwork that involves a community event, it's not possible for everyone who may be interested in what you're doing to attend. So being able to document your work and share that not only through your website, but also in passing through emails or having meetings with people and mentioning what you're doing, and social media world, sharing those images and videos on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Like, those are great ways to continue sharing the stories of the artwork, and also sharing the stories of the ways that different people have been impacted by the artwork too. There's been a lot of conversation around community, and there are different ways that community can be built, whether that be through the in-person events or through things like this, or through DMs on Instagram. Like, there is that we're just interested in connecting with each other. And I think the documentation of your work as an artist is really the magnet that like pulls everybody into the orbit, and also can be an activator of those conversation pieces, but also an activator again of that reflection that we want people to do, so that they make different kinds of choices and move towards positive change.
Yeah, I wanted
Thank
to
you. Oh yes, Candelaria.
address sort of what you had asked Napoleon. Everybody has creativity inside them and has a creative impulse. And I think sometimes we silo. You don't have to make your living as an artist or part of your living as an artist to in fact be an artist or to be creative. If you think about Black people in fashion, Latinx people in fashion, that creativity. If you think about going to church and the music, that's creativity. You think about who, you could have a sweet potato pie cook-off, and we have a contest about who could make this. That's creativity. If you think about dance and music and storytelling. We all have stories. We all have backgrounds. We all want to record the stories of the older people in our family and hear from the younger people and spread joy. So that creative impulse and having outlets for it. So when we did the literary annual, or when you do an open studio, when you do an open call, and you have opportunities for people to answer the call, whether or not they are degreed, right? Because we don't, some of the things that we say people have to, you can get a degree in process and technique, but you can't get a degree in talent, right? A degree can't make an untalented person talented. So we have incredible talents in throughout our communities, throughout the generations, and having organizations and vehicles similar to the work that you all are doing at the Urban Ministry, where there are places for people to gather and places for people to show their work and places for community-based photographers to come and to record experiences. All of that is creativity, and we have a world that's filled with, I think, some of the frustration and some of the ways people act out comes because they don't have an outlet for that inner voice. They don't feel that anybody's going to listen to their story. And we need to just do more of that. So I wanted to make sure I made that point.
Thank you so much. So that brings me a little bit to the next point. Boston Business Journal reported this month that city officials have launched a campaign to uplift communities that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. All-inclusive Boston. So it's a 4 to 6 week campaign is said to cost $2.5 million. So where impression and elevate communities. We mentioned earlier resource sharing. How can the artists don't have $2.5 million to spend on uplifting our communities? What advice do you have to affect that type of change? I guess, Napoleon, I'll start with you.
Well, I would say to continue, or maybe when the visitation possibilities become more available, continue what I've been doing my entire career as a creative person, is engaging with the larger public, engaging younger and older artists, and having and sharing the wealth that I have in terms of, when I say wealth, the spirit that I have locally and internationally, that we continue to engage with the larger community on a co-equal basis, in the sense that all of us have something to contribute one to the other, and that as we come together and share, we all become bigger and richer spiritually, aesthetically, and as a community. And so it is, I see it in my children who have grown up, and my granddaughter who is now, will be 20 this year, that the manner in which they live their lives has been enriched by this sharing that they have grown up in, which was just a normal way in which I live, is through the giving. And one of my two newest daughters, who is peering back at me on my screen here, Chanel Thervil, are the outcomes of that. And that's where my major contribution is focused at, is engaging the younger generation so that they can be connected to the root of what sharing and community and family is about, because it's a family. It's a family affair.
Chanel, can you speak to that? The importance, the impact of mentors like Candelaria and Napoleon, the difference in your path they made by their activism in opening doors. Can you talk about what it looked like before interacting and engaging with them, and then since in that moment, hopefully to maybe inspire others who have, whether it be in arts or other areas, the opportunity to really effect change by connecting?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest barrier for me jumping fully into a career as an artist was not seeing people do it. Art was a thing that was far away. Like so much of our conversation is also around how people are perceiving arts and also how people see themselves in relation to the arts that are happening around them. And I think for me, as someone who's a product of an immigrant family, as someone who's the first in their family to get a master's degree, like the concept of jumping into art as a career was foreign. And even though I had been through multiple years of school and learned some of these things with that technical credential, I didn't know any Black artists who were alive and making stuff that I could call on the phone or go to their studio or have a conversation with them. These weren't people that were within reach. So when I moved to Boston about 8 years ago, it was me kind of stumbling through mass art and hoping to get a sense of what being an artist actively looked like now, as opposed to in a textbook or that person who's on a pedestal on the news. Like I wanted to see that in a real human being that I could talk to. And that for me was like the transformation of starting to see myself and the possibilities there. And realizing, oh, if this is what an artist looks like on a day-to-day, like through talking to this person and being in their studio and seeing what they go through to order supplies, like, oh, I'm capable of doing those things too. So maybe this being an artist thing is less of a dream and something that I'm not connected to and more of a possible pathway for me. And I think I think the biggest barrier, again, in regards to getting Black artists to thrive and prosper creatively in society is those invisible barriers around the projections of their lack of ability or the projections of the lack of the credentials or not having the right credential. And I think it's through really pressuring not only institutions to change some of their gatekeeping policies, like Candelaria mentioned around, like, what do we want people to have as proof that they can be a part of a call or proof that they can audition or proof that they can be present in these spaces. It's really, again, it's about understanding that creativity is something that's intrinsic and it's a possibility for everyone. So that needs to be changed in our policies. That also needs to be changed in how we talk to artists and valuing them by paying them for their work. But I think on an intra-community level too, we have to start encouraging each other and just saying, oh, you made a painting and you feel like it's ugly, make another one. Try again. Oh, you want to make a painting and you don't have art supplies? You know, like, I got some paints. Here, go for it.
Well, Candelaria, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had asked an earlier question. I think you start with what you have. Stop looking out. Stop looking like if dollars were what it took for us to be successful, we would all have failed by now. We know how to make a way out of no way. We know how to stretch and strain. So I think start with what you have. You can do an exhibit in your own home. You can do an exhibit in your apartment. You can do it at an exhibit at the church that you never go into on the corner. So I think we have our communities are full of faith-based institutions and organizations, many of which are aging and would love the influx of young people. So making connections with those spaces, the community rooms at all the community development corporations that exist, attending your resident association meetings so that people, and neighborhood associations, so that people understand that creativity and support for artists needs to be, think about all the empty storefronts that exist, particularly even more now in this moment. Those could all be enlivened with art making and those kinds of things if people just have the will. So we have to be there. And then, as Chanel said, supporting what already exists. A lot of times people always And this is something that I see a lot of younger people do. They have an idea, they have an experience, and they think nobody's ever done it before. And so they want to create something new. Meanwhile, right down the street, there's some people who've been working on an initiative for 3 years. So sometimes, like, I think attending each other's events, sending out information to your database about Chanel's event, about Bithya's event, because Bithya is also a musician, and letting people know about Napoleon's opening, that we should, if we send it out to everybody that we know, and then we say, okay, this week, this month, this year, whose events am I going to go and participate in? And those are the ways that you build community and that you support each other so that people don't feel that they're alone. The worst thing is to do something and feel that you're alone, that nobody listened, that nobody, supported, that nobody bought your book, that nobody, spread the word about whatever. A lot of us do this, but there are a lot more of us that could do this. And so I would say, the other thing I would say, I often say to artists and creatives is, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your neighbors what would be helpful to you. It would be helpful to me if you could buy 2 copies of my book. It would be helpful to me if you could let this library know that I published a book. It would be helpful to me if you could ask what happened to that painting that was put in storage. It would be helpful for me if you could let your PTA know that Chanel's going to be doing a workshop with students and that it's open to people outside of the school system. Sometimes people have to be given real specific asks so that they know, because sometimes people don't know how to be supportive and they don't want to intrude. And so a lot of times we keep our feelings and our power tamped down because we don't push it out or say, I could use this support.
That's a powerful piece of advice. And organizing comes down to self-organizing. I guess to email your database, you got to have one. So that's some powerful advice right there.
That part, that's the thing. That's the thing.
I think I'm going to take that one home. Well, it's 4:00, everyone. Let's see what questions we have from our viewers. Viewers, if you'd like, again, use the Q&A tab and submit your questions for our panelists. Let's see. I have a question from Marcia, who says, I'd like to hear about Candelaria's book and what her goals were in writing it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that was not a plant on my part at all, but Marcia is somebody that I actually met at the one of the first things I ever did, the first monthly workshop for ACT Roxbury. She was running a program called the Bridges Program. And she was bringing people in on tours who were involved with the MECO program in Lexington, where she lives. And so we met and we did, art shows and shopping tours and worked really closely together. Bridges became Discover Roxbury. I had written and have, I don't have to write a new thing. I have manuscripts up the wazoo. And when I was young, there was, when I was pregnant with my daughter, and then when I was pregnant with my son, there was a publication called Ebony Jr., and they had a call, and I got stories accepted and published in that magazine that Johnson Publication did. I believe in joy, and childhood is supposed to be fun. So my books are really about joy, about just normal everyday childhood experiences. So Stacy Became a Frog One Day was based on my children and my grandchildren always saying, I'm not Tommy today, I'm not Sage today, I'm this, I'm that. And when I was little, my mother used to pretend to be a cat sometimes and scare us. So those things all came together. And what I hope to do is encourage reading, encourage positive self-identity, encourage, particularly in the Stacy books, Black Girl Joy, Girl Joy, Black Family. It's an extended Black family, and there are other books that are coming along. And these are normal experiences for me, and they're normal experiences for most of us, but sometimes there are still not as many books. There are more books than ever that show Black and brown children, but there still needs to be more. So I'm all about the joy. Childhood is a time of joy, it's supposed to be. And so my books are almost always going to be about joy.
Thank you so much. Let's see, another question actually is, will this panel be available for replay? It sounds like we have an excited viewership, yes, it will be available. uum.org. You can contact us by next week, I'd imagine. This will be available. Okay, another question comes from, let me see if I can pronounce your name. I hope it's correct. Wen T says, this is very exciting for me. My concern is how we can create a good place for us to connect. I'm an Asian American artist and find Boston to be more and more separated between the communities, especially hard for people of color. We used to do more projects together in the 70s and 80s. I should think with social media and Zoom for us to connect in depth through small group meetings to get to know each other, to get to work with each other. I'm not an organizer, but can those who are good at it do that? What suggestions do we have from the panelists?
Well, I know that Mentee. He and I did a project many years ago at a school in East Boston, and he is someone that is dear to me as a creative person and as a human being in and of himself. And I would say that when continue to use these formats that we have before us, such as what we're on right now. But as soon as it's possible for us to start getting back together, we need to get back to what I've always been about and what I grew up in is coming together face to face and sharing food and sharing time and sharing conversation and sharing that in each other's homes, visiting each other, not depending on institutions or structures outside of your own home or studio to provide that place to gather, but gathering at your home. And, so Wendy, as soon as the weather gets better, and I'm saying the virus, COVID-19 weather gets better, we're going to be hanging out again, okay? And that's for me, that's what it's about. It's about being in touch with each other. We don't have to, nobody has to make an appointment to come stop by my house. Just, tap on the door because I'm here. And that's one of the things I found rather strange when I came to Boston. People say, don't come by unless you let me know you're coming. Well, my door is always open. Wendy's door has always been open. And many other artists in Boston, their homes and doors have always been open. And I've had a wonderful life of interactivity with each other. And I'm just I can't wait until it's time till we can get back to going to each other's home again. And
Napoleon, Wen T raised his hand. Wen T, did you want to say something, Napoleon?
I think, can you hear me?
I hear you, brother.
Yeah, Napoleon, I would love to meet up with you like we planned many times, as well as I would like to meet all the other three of you too. Maybe to either just have a Zoom meeting to get to know each other first, or if we can later on to sit down. I'm better at one-on-ones, and I get to know people that we can really just express. I notice that people can, when they talk to each other one-on-one, we're much deeper going into the real questions rather than just saying sort of generic things. So I'm really looking forward. I think I'll really try, to meet up with each one of you.
Thank you, Wen T. And the contact information for everyone on the panel, the websites will be available in the chat at the end of the event. So please feel free to follow up. So with Zoom, those can be arranged. Okay, I have another question from the viewers. Claire says, do you imagine the Roxbury Open Studios will go forward in 2021?
Yes, because my door will be open, and I am encouraging the other artists in October, which is usually the first weekend in October of each year, which Candelaria is smiling because she is instrumental in starting this over 2-decade journey that has opened the world up to the creative energies and individuals in Roxbury. So I'm not speaking from any formal kind of context that we have had, the core group who has been shepherding this on for these years, but I am certain because of last year and because of my own intent that we will do that again October of this year. And keep your eyes open, ears open, because we will have the information out.
Speaking of organizing, What are the ways that you sound the alarm that these things are happening? For those who are not considering themselves in the know, where do people look to follow up on all the goings on? Candelaria.
Okay, so this is a pet peeve of mine, and people know me, know that I've been nice for an hour, so that's a record for me. When we used to do the film festival and open studios and all this stuff, we would have an evaluation form and we'd say, how did you hear about it? And somebody would say, you need to advertise more. And then somebody else would say, oh, I heard it. I saw it on the bus. I saw it in the banner. I saw it on Cityline. And all of those things would be true. So I would say that if you want to be informed, the banner comes out every week. Dorchester Reporter comes out every week. Usually organizations and individuals have ads. Social media, all of us have Facebook presence. Many of us have Instagram presence. It's out there that you've got to look at it. Look at Cityline on a regular basis. Look at, BNN. There are all kinds of things that are put out there. So connect with people on social media. And for me, I will send direct things out, to make sure from everything from the Friends of the Dudley Library, now the Roxbury Library that I'm connected with, to my own Facebook page, to my own Instagram page. The information is out there. You've got to look at it. There are lots of, there's the Network of Arts Administrators of Color. And there's, I don't know if it's Boston Black Creatives. There's the BAMS Fest. There's Roxbury Cultural District effort. There's Roxbury Main Streets. Every neighborhood in Boston has a main street. So get involved in the existing institutions and you will definitely find out. And when you find out something, send it out to your list. I have a list. Doing a database is every time I get somebody's email address, I add it to a category. It's either cultural aficionados, or it's photographers, or it's graphic designers. And some people get a lot of stuff from me, and others I curate. I do one called Info for Children and Families. And it's literally just something that I create and I keep it up now just to share information, because I'm an information junkie. Once I send it out, it's on you whether you use it. But we
plug into Candelaria. That's the
what'd you say?
Plug into Candelaria. That's one way to do it.
Right, and I would say my own experience there. Candy is absolutely right. Chanel also keeps people plugged in on her website, and so do I. So go to the different artists or creative persons that go to their website, because it's not just where we put our work, it's where we put our information. And that's a sharing platform we use for the planet to know where we are. I mean, just recently I went for a medical examination, and one of the clinicians that was working in there connected me with her sister who lives in Italy, who's Ethiopian, who we've been connecting with each other all week now because of my going to get my medical appointment. So the sharing is just simply stepping out there and asking and looking and seeing, and it's as simple as that. And we do our part, so you all just have to connect into us, because we got the wings.
And at uuum.org, there is an artist directory featuring artists of color. It's a new initiative. I think 17 artists are featured there. We're planning on a new spring edition. So that's another way to find artists. I think almost all of our panelists are on there now, and perhaps in the spring edition, all of our panelists will be, perhaps. All right, so any other comments before I pose another question? Yes, Candelaria.
When we were at ACT Roxbury, we actually asked what people's affiliation were to Roxbury. So some people grew up here but no longer live here. They had an affiliation. And even though we primarily served Black artists and artists of color, it wasn't exclusively. There are people who have been artists and creatives who've lived in Roxbury for decades and who've participated and supported. So I think it's really important that we make what we do as inclusive as it can be, and that we are not so siloed. Like there's a Roxbury connection to Mattapan, and there's Roxbury connection to the South End, and Roxbury used to include Jamaica Plain and West Roxbury, depending on when in history you look at the boundaries. So I know that where I sit, but I also know that there are artists who actually connected with me and said, you know, I'm an artist, but I'm a Black artist, but I live in Canton, or I grew up in Roxbury, but I now live in Lexington. Does that mean I can't ever participate in what you do? And when we were at Roxbury, that was definitely not it. That we wanted, that those connections are still very much. I'm still in St. Louis, even though I've lived here longer than I ever lived in St. Louis. That Mississippi water is a part of my veins, and so I like us to be inclusive. And I think that's just very much a part of the world that we're in. There's a tribe of good people who are trying to create and not destroy. And wherever we sit, we ought to have ways for us to coalesce and connect. And one of the things that Marcia did was there was the Museum of our National Heritage in Lexington. And she actually came up with the idea of us having a show there. And what was important is that it got Roxbury-based artists to go and find new supporters and patrons, to find a new vehicle for showing their work. We did it 2 years. The first year, I think it was a weekend, and after that, it was a week. And then it also had a lot of the suburban based artists who were people of color were just thrilled, and people who lived there in those communities were just thrilled to have something in their neighborhood. So I think it's important for us to be very proud of where we are, but not to be exclusionary when we don't. Because that's not the way the world is, and that's definitely not the way the world needs to be.
Like Chanel says, the orbit.
Yeah, and to add to that, because over those 20 years of Juneteenth celebrations here, my guest books, because I've got plenty of them, and I learned to do those from Alan Rowe and Crate, one of our presenters who is just extraordinary man, that people came from as far as Connecticut, Detroit, New York City. I had people here at the house over that weekend from everywhere. I mean, and I have many people who were in town from other parts of the world who came with friends of theirs to the weekend celebration. So again, we've done these things, Roxbury Act and Discover Roxbury, and the now Cultural District, Roxbury Cultural District, have done these things, including the Museum of the National Center of Afro-American Artists, which were always an integral part of the cultural landscape of Roxbury, yes, which is an international landscape, because we are not, the name Roxbury is a geographic location, but the tentacles are worldwide.
Yes, thank you. And there's another question from a viewer. Claire says, Mayor Janey and Boston are publicizing tourism to Boston's neighborhoods. Are Roxbury Nubian Square artists connected to this effort? I hope so.
Yes, we are. Some of us just individually, but a lot of us are being connected through the Roxbury Cultural District and through other entities of artists sharing with each other. So formally, I don't think there's it's a new initiative that she's just put out, and we are definitely willing to and excited about participating and expanding that and letting it mature to what her vision and ours collectively would be.
Thank you. Now, the arts industry rivals sports as far as generating income. So can anybody address where the gap is, where we talk about local artists, and then what happens and gets celebrated? Is there a way to, again, bridge the gap for a more impactful future where local artists are concerned? Do I need to restate the question? I think that came out a little mixed up.
No, I think it made sense.
Okay.
I would say, for me, in my experience, institutions are lazy in that they default to what they know. They default to what is easy for them within reach, and that is their default of, what do I already know? Who do I already see? Who is already doing the things? And they don't invest a lot of time, energy, and effort in exploring beyond what their networks typically are or have been. So I would say, again, it's on us as artists. It's really about that, being cheerleaders for each other and supporting each other's work internally. And then externally, it's about putting pressure on these institutions to change some of their policies and some of their requirements for credentials for opportunities. So one of the big things that I've been seeing going around right now is this call for mural arts for the side of a wall of a building on Jamaica Plain. And in this call, they want letters of recommendation, they want a CV, they want a bio, they want you to pay a $20 fee. And then they also are going to require that you have some sort of degree just to submit a proposal.
Yeah.
A
Ridiculous.
proposal to make the work, not to get the job, not to be paid for your proposal, to submit your intellectual labor, time and effort for free. You have to have all of those credentials. So again, it's like things like that. Those are the things that keep us, those are the gatekeeping pieces that keep us away from pursuing these opportunities that can enrich our careers and help us to spread our reach as artists. And institutions really have to they have to care enough to make that change.
Candelaria?
So Chanel, I've been on both sides of this, and I must say that some of that's true, but some of that's not true. If you don't have an artist resume, if you don't have a bio, if you don't have a statement, how do I know? If I can't get you a letter of reference by someone who's worked with you, who can vouch for the fact that you're a practicing artist and not somebody who's never done any artwork. So having been on both sides, I must say, and I was on a committee that funded something that ended up not being able to survive the elements, because due diligence wasn't done. So I think that there are parts of it that we can release, like having a degree, but I wouldn't release somebody from having a bio statement or a resume. I remember there's a woman I know who is an actor, and when I met her early in her career, she's a phenomenal actor, but she now has developed this fear of auditioning. Well, part of the work of being an actor is that you have to audition.
Right.
And part of the work of submitting your work for anything that you're not self-publishing yourself is that you have to know that you might get rejected. And I wrote a book called Handling Rejection for my son, who's an actor. It's a little booklet. And I said, they can reject your application, they can't reject you. And so some of this is, you have my name, you can Google where are the Black artists, where are this, and I have worked with people individually for no charge to do an artist resume so that they can have their stuff together. With the Fellows Athenaeum Trust Fund, I had people who said to me that they wanted to put their application in handwriting. That's not acceptable in today's world. You either have to pay somebody to type it. If you can't type it, use some voice recognition software to get it done. Some things we have to do to be prepared. And what I can say is that it sounds like, and I've said this to somebody with the literary annual, I can't describe it more than that, but one person came at me really, and I said, it sounds like you'll be ready for next year's submission, because there will be another edition, because I made sure I did things 1 year annually, right? But this year you're not ready. And I'm not hanging up my deadline for you to get ready as an individual. So there's certain things that we have to know how to do. If you're preparing a recipe, you got to have some food. Now you can be good and say, I don't have this ingredient, I can substitute that, but you got to have some of that together. So some of it is not gatekeeping, some of it is seriousness, some of it is to have consistent things. So for instance, one thing people are doing, Chanel, is sometimes people are now doing video interviews instead of having written interviews, because some people are more comfortable. But I always say, like, I don't do budgets well, so I have somebody as a member of my personal team that I can get to do budgets for me, sometimes in exchange for a peach cobbler, sometimes in exchange for money. She knows that she can come to me to get me to read her letter and to read her proposal and to give her feedback on it. So that's, I think, having that team that you assemble so that you can meet it. And the final thing that I will say is, most of the bigger institutions have open processes, but they count on the fact that we don't show up. So I used to go at Roxbury, I had to become comfortable being the only woman sometimes, and very often the only Black person in the room. And I would go sometimes to a Boston Foundation breakfast or to a Mass Cultural Council event way in the western part of the state, which was unfamiliar to me. And there would be name tags of people who signed up, and some of them were people from Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan, but they never showed up. And so what happened is, because people are lazy, Act Roxbury would get a call and say, you know, we have a little bit of money left over. Do you have a program that we might be able to put some money from? So we have to be willing to go in those white spaces, just like you better go to your alma mater if you graduated from college and claim that college, because they count on Black people either not showing up or only showing up for the Black alumni events, which means that the other resources don't get shared. You have to be in the room in order to know what resources people have and what they're planning. And so that's something that I think those of us who know have to be able to do. Yeah. And that's my sermon 202. 203 comes next week.
well, I'll add my footnote to that, simply to say that something that I've always pursued and is very, very important is for professional development on the side of individual artists. So many artists who are extraordinarily talented, and I'm talking about in all fields of creativity, have bought into the mythology and the BS that artists should be struggling and poor, and that it's not something that is professional. Professional development means having a resume, having an artist statement, having images, having made photographs when they used to make photographs or slides, which I come from the slide age, or digital or videos of your work, sometimes even in progress or as it develops, so that people can in fact know what it is you do. You can say you're an artist, but my position, when somebody says, well, I'm an artist, I say, show me the work. Show me the work. So you either have it documented as JPEGs or as videos or the actual work itself, or you have other aspects of evidence that you are an artist other than you opening your mouth and telling me that you're an artist. An artist is a person whose evidence is shared by other people. And if you can't bring it forward, they don't know you can do it.
See, that's wonderful. And, you know, Candelaria and Napoleon, there are a lot of people who are doing lots of great things, but in the artist community, there are not enough of you. So to Chanel's point, you know, however other people are making it, sometimes it's not seen, it's not shared. You both have made it your business to kind of help let people know, you know, what it takes, what it's taken. So I just want to thank you for that, for bridging the gap. So it's 4:26, and I know we did start late. Are there any final thoughts that panelists would like to offer before I close up?
Keep making art.
I was about to say, do the work, make the art, and Candy, let me know where I can get your book. And again, I'd like to say that I enjoy always looking at Chanel on a Zoom because her grandmother is always present, and I love it.
I'd say keep creating. You're either on the creative side of life or you're on the destructive side of life. And so whether you're a patron of art or you're a person who creates art, just keep doing it and vote. Support each other, love each other. That's what love is. The only thing, as our brother Stevie Wonder wrote in a song, only love can conquer hate. And we are in a moment where there's the haters on one side and the lovers on the other. And we know what side that we want to be on. So that's what I would say. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Chanel, any words?
Yeah, keep making art.
Oh yeah, you said that. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just riding the feel-good wave.
Yeah, keep making art.
We have 2 more minutes, and one of our viewers raised their hands. And if you can be brief, I will let you speak. Patricia Thaxton, you are, I think you are on.
Come on, sister, speak up.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
I just want to say hi, Art Family. It's so good to see you. And you're always informative and lift me up. And I'm just proud of, you know, all the things that you're doing. And it's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Likewise. Hear your voice. Likewise.
And I want to thank also and recognize all of our viewers. And also I see Wendy. Thank you so much for sending the love in the chat also. And yes, we just want to hopefully go ahead, Napoleon.
One last thing, and kudos and blessings to you, because you have done it and continue doing it.
Oh, The UUUM. Okay.
Yes,
I was like,
yes,
who's
yes,
you?
Yay.
Thank you all so much. The artists panelists contact emails are going to be in the chat if they haven't appeared already. Thank you so much for attending our event. Panelists, thank you so much for a very candid, open discussion. I hope we can do it again soon. And thank you all. Have a wonderful week.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good way to start the week.